Hello, welcome to another episode of Triptych Tock, where we have a trio of guests, a current student, an alum, and a faculty member discuss their different perspectives on a chosen theatery topic for 15 minutes or less. This week's theme is Feminist Theater, so we'll be asking all three guests the same questions in hopes of getting some different answers. We like to see how viewpoints evolve as they hone their craft and get a little insight into their individual experiences. So I have here with me LeRoya Sanford, who is a sophomore at Dickinson who's majoring in theater. She's a performer and creator with unique style who continues to make her mark on Dickinson's theater scene. We also have Sophia Scorcia. She's a 2020 Dickinson grad who majored in history and Italian and became involved with the Mermaid Players and the Department of Theater and Dance in her freshman year. She is currently living in New York City and working in advertising, but is anxiously awaiting the day that she can get back into theater. And last but not least, we have Dr. Carrie Miller, who is an interdisciplinary artist and educator specializing in spectatorship, care, and play. She received her MFA from the University of Virginia and her PhD from Ohio State. So let's get started with this question. To kind of bring it all around, what does feminist theater mean to you? And how would you explain it to someone outside of the theater bubble? We'll start with you, LeRoya, and then we'll move to Sophia and then end with Karie.
Sure. So feminist theater to me, I feel like it can be personal to every single person and their experience in theater, no matter their gender. It means something different for each person. Personally, for me, it's making the intention in the theater of having a space that's equal on the stage.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because I think kind of the first, or like whenever I first think of it, I tend to think of it in terms of like the material itself. Like feminist theater is like a play that's taking place or written it through a feminist lens or something like that. But I think what most stands out, and the part that really is unique to me, is just it's kind of an all-encompassing thing, and it's not only the material, but it's actually just the process and like the way to do theater and the way to rehearse, and having a kind of a feminist space in which you're rehearsing, and it's just kind of being a space that fosters inclusivity and collaboration and just kind of all kinds of communication and things like that.
Yeah, and I would add yes to all of that. And there's something about, it's always about striving for equity in the space. And that includes spectators, and that includes basically everyone. And especially thinking about feminism in its broader application, like an intersectional feminism, and how and it includes sort of content as well. It's not just about how we produce and what the power structures are like and how we produce, but, disrupting patterns and cliches and traditions that are oppressive or, foreground the straight white male gaze. And it's really hard, I'll also add, because the theater has grown up in its sort of patriarchal little structure. It's like inherently a hierarchical industry, and has become what seems to be an inherently hierarchical form, even though it's not, as feminist theater kind of demonstrates.
So given everything you've said about feminist theater, what has been your most illuminating or eye-opening experience working in a feminist theater space when compared with your other experiences in the theater? We'll start with Sophia and then go to Karie and then LeRoya.
I think something actually to kind of go off of what Professor Miller was just saying about kind of this idea that it's creating equity, but also not only among the actors or the directors, but also the audience. I think that's something that is really meaningful and eye-opening to me that I never really experienced, because we all think in kind of theater, it's like the audience and then there's a wall and then it's the performers. And in my experience at Dickinson last year in our production of We Are Pussy Riot, just kind of the merging of all of those different worlds and having it be like, because we were all in such an enclosed space and everyone was experiencing and living in the same space for however long this performance was, making sure that the audience was just kind of as comfortable and as just as much of a part of it as they could be without it being a kind of very abrupt or I don't know if I'm making sense, like just kind of having it be such a collaborative experience and not as much having it be a show that's like, this is for the audience and that's it, but it's more of like an experience that we all shared. And I think that was something that really, really stood out to me, that I'd never participated in and never really got to like think about that way.
Yeah, I've experienced feminist theater in rehearsal and performance spaces. When, as an actor, I've experienced it only in fits and starts. So it's something that is not necessarily carried throughout the process. And part of what I was interested in terms of research was sort of like uncovering ways of doing theater that are more equitable, because of my experience as an actor with it not really being a consistent practice. And being able to, one of the sort of pieces of the puzzle has been being able to practice it as a director and knowing that that it's not a game of perfection. So like I've experienced shows as a spectator, like pieces by Emma Rice and Knee High, where everybody is cared for and everybody is necessary. And you can feel the care that went into the making of the thing and the equity that was present in making, and then that carries over into how it's delivered. And so I've been striving in my own work to try to get to that place. And again, it's hard. It's really hard, but the more you practice, the easier it gets, I think. LeRoya?
Yeah, I think part of the question that was asked before that also relates to this one, which is when I think of like feminine and how that is looked down upon in some cultures and things like that when it comes to showing emotion. And I feel like a part of feminist theater is embracing that emotion, and not only acting that emotion, is really feeling that emotion and accepting the feeling of playing a character that is embodying that emotion, not only trying to act like that emotion. And a specific example of that was like last semester in Professor Miller's class, I struggled a lot with being vulnerable. I didn't realize that was one of the biggest things that was kind of keeping me from really acting and being truly in the character. And it opened my eyes when I saw that one of the males in our classes was encouraged to perform from the female perspective in one of our plays. And to him, he was like, oh, why should I do that? Like, I don't connect with the character. But after he did do it, he actually was like, oh, I kind of understood this on a level that I didn't understand before. And it changed his perspective. And so I feel like all of that shows how the feminist theater kind of comes together.
So do you have, I know we've been talking about feminist theater in terms of kind of a space or kind of an experience, but do you have maybe a favorite piece of feminist theater work, or just a work that speaks to you that you'd like to share with our viewers? It could be a play, a musical, anything you can think of. We'll go with Karie first, then LeRoya, and then Sophia.
I mentioned Knee High, Emma Rice and Knee High earlier. And the piece that I always cite as the most impactful to me was their production of Tristan and Isolde that I saw when I was in Chicago. And she does sort of adaptations, but they're heavily devised adaptations. And there's a whole process before the show of caretaking where they're not ushers and they're not like obligatory audience participation getters. They're just kind of strange people who are very kind and making conversation with you. They sort of demonstrate that we're the weirdest people here, and it kind of, I don't know, generates this bizarre sense of belonging. And I've also had the chance to dramaturg for a couple of directors who just like a production of Information for Foreigners, and that piece is a lot. Is the shortest way to say what it is. It's intense, it's complicated, and watching the director sort of empower the students, and like they did so much of the figuring out, and they were so crucial to the making of meaning, and they were then so caring with their spectators. It was just kind of like a great experience to be part of.
I feel like one of the main root plays that I've experienced, like when reading it, I haven't seen it yet. Hopefully one day I will, but A Raisin in the Sun. The way the mother is written is such an empowering character. And especially as an African American woman, it's really empowering to see the way that she's portrayed and the family is also portrayed and how they follow her lead when it comes to the way she is. I feel like on top of that, on a sillier kind of way, is Rocky Horror Picture Show. It just brings so much femininity and fun and embracing of gender and different norms and things like that. When I watch it, it always brings a smile to my face and has such a root of equality to me.
I think that was such an interesting answer, because I think one thing that kind of, I have also an answer to this question, but I just want to respond to that Rocky Horror, because I think one thing that people always think of when they like, or not to generalize, but I think me also, like when you think of feminist theater, I often think of like something very serious, something that has like a very strong thesis, mm-hmm. and that you come away thinking like, wow, my whole perception of the world and of gender norms has radically changed. But I think it's so true that it can be just like fun too. Like Rocky Horror just gives you a different sense, like all kind of gender norms, gender identity even is just kind of like all in flux, and it's just something that it makes you think, but in such a like more kind of fun way. So I thought that's such an interesting answer. But also for me, one that I also have never gotten to see it, but reading it really was super impactful to me. And just kind of, just changed the way I thought of a lot of things is Ntozake Shange's For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide. And I read that for a history class, actually. I was doing like my own kind of research, but that just really, it speaks to so many things, and it's just such a different kind of take on the genre, because it's this kind of like choreo poem, so it merges like drama and acting and also dance to just kind of show all different kinds of expression, and it just has this it just tells stories that were groundbreaking for that time, also in the 1970s and still now, and just a way that women, and especially African American women, just had this like this show, this place to kind of tell these stories that were just so beautiful and so empowering, and it's just something that really has always stuck with me. I hope I get to see it one day.
And I'll just yes to all of yes, I agree with all of the things that have been said. Like, I don't know, what is it? Retweet. But I also want to like just like join to like yes, Rocky Horror Picture Show. And there's something in all of the shows that we're talking about, a little bit in terms of like the way there's less so with something like Raisin in the Sun, but when you're able to find moments of play and joy, instead of it being sort of like feminist theater is not like this heavy thing. It's really, when you look at it from the perspective of like feminist theater is a very empathetic way of doing theater, And one of the things that builds empathy is playfulness, is collective joy. So that's like Rocky Horror Picture Show is a perfect example of that, especially in that it is intentionally fully experiential for the audience and everyone who's in it. And now you have made me want to produce it. So thanks for that.
Okay, unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but that was a very interesting conversation. I just want to thank Sophia and LeRoya and Karie for joining us, and I hope our viewers learned a little something about feminist theater and maybe feel inspired to try something new or read something new. Stay tuned and keep an eye out on the department's social media for more news about future Triptych Talks.
Triptych Talk.